Okay, family, we are back, and today's lesson is strata versus cluster sampling. Two words that you have in your reading guide already. You probably weren't paying attention when you were copying down the vocab words, but let me tell you, these are probably two of the most commonly confused topics in the entire year of AP Stats. I feel like I get questions all year long, especially at the end during AP review time about, can you talk about stratified and cluster again? So here it is in a nutshell. Let's pretend you are interested to figure out what the Fremd High School student body is currently watching on Netflix, okay? And BT dubs, if I talk too fast, I'm not trying to make some long ass video, okay? You can pause it, copy down, and then play, all right? So anyways, apologies if I'm talking too fast. Remember, you got a pause button. Here we go. Should we ask every single student at Fremd, what are you watching on Netflix? And record it and then come back to the classroom and analyze all the data? Probably not. That would be like really difficult, right? You have to find everybody, keeping a good log of all your information. Somebody's absent, somebody's in the bathroom, somebody's in test makeup. Like that would be hard, right? We talked about this in class yesterday, about how it's difficult to ask every single person a question. And so therefore, we have all these different ways of taking a random sample, okay? So remember the vocab word we talked about yesterday. Here's where in class I would say turn to somebody around you and remind them of this vocab word right here, what it stands for and what it means. This is what we talked about yesterday. Could we do an SRS? Remember what that means again. Everybody in the entire school has an equal chance of being chosen. So everybody is numbered, let's pretend alphabetically like I did in class, except there's like 2,700 students and everybody has a number. And then I lottery style call off numbers. And then I have to go freaking find them, right? Still not that easy. An SRS is not easy to do when you have a freaking large population, okay? That is not going to be the easiest thing to do. Okay, it's a good method because remember the R stands for randomization, simple random sample. It is random, so that's good, but I cannot easily assign every single student a unique number from 1 to, I think I looked that number up, and that's the total number of students at Fremd right now. And then I have to go find the ones whose numbers I randomly generated. You can see how for a very large population, an SRS is still not super easy, okay? So enter these two new vocab words, these two new solutions. We have two different ways that we can maybe try and answer this question without having to do an SRS. Okay, a stratified random sample, what you wrote down in your reading guide. Let me zoom in. This is when we divide the population into homogeneous groups. Okay, so groups that they have something in common. Okay, and then I take a certain number of people from each group. And by the way, the groups are referred to as the strata. Okay, let me give you an example. Let's say I divide Fremd High School into freshmen, sophomores, juniors, and seniors by class. Don't you think what the freshmen are watching on Netflix is probably different from what the seniors are watching on Netflix? So wouldn't it be a good idea to try to get equal representation of each class in my sample? If I do an SRS, I might have like 5 freshmen represented and like 25 seniors represented. You're probably not going to get equal representation. So this is one of the main pluses of a stratified sample, is you can get equal representation from each group. Okay, so that's kind of cool. And let's pretend that we number all of the freshmen then, 1 through, I don't know, 700 something, however many freshmen there are. And then I randomly select like 10 freshmen. And then I do the same thing with the sophomore class, and I randomly select 10 sophomores, and I randomly select 10 juniors, and I randomly select 10 seniors. Now I have equal representation from each group, and it's a little bit simpler, and I have divided my entire Fremd High School population into keyword homogeneous groups, and then you take a certain number from each group. I'll give you another example after this to help drive that home, but that in a nutshell is what a stratified random sample is with an example, okay? How could I use the stratified random sample to collect my data? Randomly choose a certain number of students from each group, and that becomes the survey, like we talked about. 10 freshmen, 10 sophomores, 10 juniors, 10 seniors. a certain number. Why am I saying 10? Just because, I don't know, maybe Mr. Langer wants 20 from each class, or maybe you want 50 from each class, or maybe, what did we do in class yesterday? 5 people? Maybe we want 5 people from each class, who knows? But you do a certain number of students from each group, which we refer to as the strata, the homogeneous groups, and they get to do the survey. Now let's talk about what a cluster sample means. Here it is. Using a predetermined group. So you're not grouping them based on something homogeneously, if that's a word. It's a predetermined group as your sample, as long as the group somewhat mirrors what the population looks like. So it's like a small microcosm of Fremd High School. And when you use your predetermined group, which is called a cluster, you survey every single student in that cluster, okay? Here's an example. Correct me if I'm wrong, but don't you think PE periods, like if you go to the gym during second period, aren't freshmen, sophomores, juniors, and seniors all represented in second period PE, for example? I'm pretty sure there are honors students and non-honors students that take second period PE. I'm pretty sure there are athletes and musicians and people in theater and other extracurricular activities all represented in second period PE. So it's okay to maybe look at second period PE as a small microcosm of Fremd High School. It has a really good mix of people inside second period PE. So then I would select second period PE, and I would give the sample to every single student in this. I said that backwards. I would give the survey to every single student in that second period PE. I think another example would be fourth period lunch. Don't you think the different lunch periods probably look like the microcosm of Fremd High School on a smaller scale? I'm pretty sure we have pretty much roughly equal representation of freshmen, sophomores, juniors, and seniors in fourth period lunch. I think we have all different types of students in terms of honors, AP, regular, athletes, musicians, theater, extracurricular activities. I think it mirrors what the population looks like. So you could also randomly select a lunch period. And then again, every student gets your survey in fourth period lunch. How could I use a cluster sample to collect my data? Randomly select a period, or sometimes you choose 2 periods or 3 periods. It just depends, what the question's asking. Or randomly select a lunch period, like I said, or multiple lunch periods, and survey every single person in that cluster. Let me point out a couple important differences. Stratified and cluster sample. So for stratified, we have homogeneous groups. And in clusters, we do not have homogeneous groups. And so when we're stratifying our random sample over here, the homogeneous groups, we're dividing them into groups based on some similarity that they have. When you're doing a cluster sample, what the cluster is supposed to look like is not homogeneous. It's supposed to be a small microcosm of the entire population. It's supposed to have a good mix of people or individuals in the cluster, okay? Another really important differentiator is that in a stratified sample, you only ask a certain number of people from each group. And yes, they are selected randomly, but it's not every sophomore or every junior. It's like 10 of each, okay? We talked about that already. In a cluster sample, you survey every single student in the randomly selected cluster. Okay, so I do have the words randomly down here because stratified and cluster, there is randomization present, but it's different for each one. You randomly choose the number of students that you're selecting. So like 10 freshmen, 10 sophomores, 10 juniors, 10 seniors, whatever. For a cluster sample, you randomly select the cluster or a couple clusters. And then again, remember, everybody gets that sample or that survey. Anyways, hopefully I wasn't talking too fast, but that is the big differences between the two. Memorize it for a while until we get several examples that we can look at, so that it makes a little bit more sense. But I did add, just into here, this is not in your notes, but I asked ChatGPT to come up with a couple different examples for me. In terms of how do we decide what type of sample it is. So here's one. A health agency is conducting a study on nurse burnout. Maybe a lot of you are interested in medicine, hospitals, or nursing, okay? They classify the hospitals by size. So apparently they classify hospitals into 3 different sizes: small, medium, and large. Do you see our homogeneous groups here? Some of the hospitals are considered small. They form a group. Some of the hospitals are considered medium. They form a group. And then our third group is large. And we randomly select not everybody from the hospital, but only 10 from each. Okay? Keywords I tried to highlight. I tried to make some notes over here. That, my friends, is a very classic stratified random sample. These strata are the homogeneous groups, which are represented by the size of the hospital. The strata in the previous example were freshmen, sophomores, juniors, seniors. You divide your population first into homogeneous groups somehow, and then you randomly select a few from each, and they get to do your survey or be part of your sample. Keywords, 10 from each, or whatever number is represented in the question, as opposed to all nurses. We would select like a couple hospitals and survey all nurses if it was a cluster sample. Okay. Let's look at this example. A national restaurant chain wants to survey customers about a new menu item. I would be happy to taste a new menu item for restaurants. I love going to eat at restaurants. The chain has 500 restaurants, so it's a large chain located in many cities. And the company randomly selects 20 restaurants, and keyword, everybody at the restaurant gets to do the survey. Okay, so our restaurants here are going to be our clusters. And we randomly select 20 of them, and everyone in those 20 restaurants gets to be surveyed. Not like 10 from each. That would be stratified, okay? So some keywords once again, and I also just wanted to point out that yes, randomization has to be present in both of these. It's different depending on how, like the wording of the question or whatever, it's different on how the random selection takes place. But they randomly selected 10 nurses from each hospital here. Here they randomly selected the restaurants, and everybody got to do the sample. That, in a nutshell, mic drop, cluster versus stratified. I will answer all of your questions next time I see you guys. Thank you for watching. And I'm going to keep this video kind of starred for reference throughout this chapter, and then especially at the end of the year when these questions start to come up again and we kind of forgot the difference between the two. So it's going to be good to have a video of these two things explained, all right? Thanks for watching. Hope you guys are having a great day. Miss you. Love you all.